Alrighty.
Can they ask questions too?
No, they cannot. If they want to, they have to join the Zoom. Okay, we're learning. We're going to go back a bit. We're holding Daf Pei Amud Beis. We're going to start from the Tanur Rabbanan on the bottom of the page, a few lines, 5 or 6 lines from the bottom. We're learning about the laws of the punishment of a prophet or a false prophet that tells people in the name of God to commit idol worship. So it says like this. It says, I'm going to bring up the Gemorah over here. Hold on. There we go. In Tanur Rabbanan, we learned like this. Navi Shediach, a Navi, a prophet that tries to push people, from the word Hadacha, to push people, to serve idols. So we have a clear verse that we're going to bring down in a second that shows that it's prohibited. He quotes the pasuk over here. We'll see in a second. So the punishment is, the rabbi said the punishment is stoning. His punishment is by stoning. Reb Shimon says bechenek. Shimon ben Gamliel says Reb Shimon ben Yochai says the punishment is by choking, not by stoning, which is much more severe. Okay, so he says like this. Hold on. So it says like this. It says Reb Shimon says by choking. Madiche, what's called Madiche someone who's not a prophet, but a group of people that push people to commit idol worship. That's called an Ir Nidachas, when the city falls for people that are instigating them. As a group, they all get affected. So there, the punishment is skila, and Rav Shimon Omer, again, he says the punishment is chenek, is choking. We have to remember there's basically three groups over here. There's a group of a prophet that prophesies officially in the name of Hashem, saying that one should serve idols. The second one is a group of people that come to push like a city to go commit idol worship. And the third one is a person who's a maces, a person who's an instigator privately to people to serve idols. So he says, so here the punishment is for the Ir Dachas, a city that gets pushed, or a prophet that pushes. That's two cases of kind of communal effect, like Rashi says. There's an argument between the rabbis and Reb Shimon of what's the punishment, because the Torah doesn't tell us clearly the punishment. The Torah tells us it's prohibited. It doesn't tell us what the punishment is. So he says the punishment. Reb Shimon says the punishment is choking, and the rabbis say the punishment is stoning, which is more severe. But we know the punishment for maces. Maces is an instigator. We learned that already. An instigator, a private instigator, to a private person, that for sure the Torah says that the punishment is stoning. So this is the question here. To Navi Shediach v'skila, my time, why the rabbis say that it's stoning? The reason the rabbis asya hadach memesis. We learn, we compare, we do Gzer Shav. Gzer Shav is we do word comparison. It's not just like Rashi says. Gzer Shav is not any person who sees two words in a verse could say, but the Torah is coming to teach us a comparison. Two words of it has to have in it, Gzer Shav, it has to have in it what's called a Mesorah. So he says, Hadacha, we learn Hadacha for Meses. So we learn Hadacha for Meses. So what is hey Avi, we're holding page some days. So he says, what is the story? What is the psukim by Meses? So they have two verses. The verse by a Navi is, I'm going to quote the verses. The verse says, Hanavi Ahu, if this prophet, officially a prophet, or Chaylam, or the dreamer, is talking both in the name of God, should die. Doesn't tell us what the death sentence should be. He speaks about God negatively. Who took you out of Egypt, redeemed you from slavery. This person is trying to push you off the way. So this is a clear verse that tells us about a false prophet that tries to prophesize about idol worship. The case of a maces, where a person who instigates, we have uskaltim vavanim v'mace, that a person who instigates not a city, a community, individuals. So you should be stoned. It tells us clearly what the punishment is. He looked to push you away from Hashem. Again, etc. So we have the word hadacha, and the rabbis have Gzeir Shav to teach us that we compare the punishments. That both a false prophet and a prophet that prophesies about idol worship and a private person amases. So the punishment is stoning. Just like over there, it's by way of stoning, so too here. Meaning, so too by a prophet. Reb Shimon says no. Misa ksiv bey. The verse says only by an by a navi, that a navi that pushes people in the name of God to serve idols, it just says the word death. Misa doesn't tell us what death sentence we should use. The Torah tells us misa. This is a rule. Whenever we don't know what the punishment is, so plain misa is considered choking. Now Rashi teaches us that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel did not have a Messiah. Let me see if Shukri wants to jump on. He says he's going to join. So Rashi says that Reb Shimon did not have a Gzeir Shav from his tradition, so therefore he wouldn't compare the Navi to the case of a masis of an instigator. Therefore, it just says the word misa. If it just says the word misa, then the misa means choking. So, okay. Go back to the Mishnah, the Tana Rabbanan. What about a people that try to push astray a city to go worship idols? So the rabbis say b'skila with stoning. My time, the Rabbanan. What's the reason the rabbis? So garmi adacha, they have a Gzeir Shava. Even they learn Gzeir Shava, a word comparison to teach us either from maces, just that there it says by nidachas the word hadacha. Obviously, it says what does the city say? The pasuk say. The pasuk says yatu anashim. Some people go out. B'nei Belial, horrible people, mikirbecha from amongst you. And they're going to push the people of the city to say, let's go serve other gods. So therefore they get punished by death. We don't know what the death is, but it says the word, hey, it's Shukri, we're holding bottom page, on the base. So but it says the word vayadichu. And the word yadichu is hadacha, to push. And so we learn it, rabbis say we compare pushing of a iranidachas to a city where people are privately instigate others to serve idols, where there it clearly says to stone them. Or we could learn it from Navi. We could learn it from a prophet. Shediach, that also pushes, that we learned before, that the punishment is stoning. So the rabbis say three of them are like one group, and it's a single kind of punishment, and the punishment is stoning. Reb Shimon says no. Gomer hadacha minav. We only learn it from a prophet. And the prophet, according to Reb Shimon, is only by choking, because he doesn't have the Gzeir Shava to compare a prophet to a instigator. Hold on a second, Aaron. And therefore we compare pushing, instigating a city to a prophet that instigates. Yes, Aaron, you wanted to ask.
Yeah, just what's adaka mean?
Well, sorry, adaka means to push someone. So if they're pushing, in this case, they're pushing people to serve idols. They're encouraging and trying to, whether it's he's speaking as a prophet, whether they're just convincing. So the Gemorah says, 1 second, Reb Shimon agrees that a private individual that's called a mason, that privately instigates others to serve idols, that the pasuk clearly says stoning. So why would we not compare people that are not claiming to be prophets, they're just trying to push a city to serve idols, to a private person that tries to push people to serve idols? It seems like that would be the most clear case to compare them to. So Reb Shimon says no. Danim masis rabbi. We'd rather use a communal situation where the prophet prophesizes to the community, and these people are instigating, so to say, the community. And by the prophet, clearly, we don't know. With the word, the Torah says misa, so it's punishment by death, without telling us clearly what type of punishment. So we assume that we conclude that it's choking. So too, there's people that instigate a city that doesn't tell us clearly. They're also affecting the public, and therefore the public would they would get choking. Turns out, according to the rabbis, the violation of instigating others to serve idols is punishable by stoning no matter what. Whether you're a private person pushing a private person, whether you're a prophet pushing it, or a false prophet pushing it, or if you are a group of people trying to push a city, so to say, another group of people. Now, in theory, we call it two different things. Mesis is based on the word of instigating, and hadach means to push. In theory, this is all the same thing. Everyone agrees that an instigator, a private person who instigates another private individual or a few other private individuals, the punishment is stoning. Even Reb Shimon would agree because clearly it says that in the Torah. Reb Shimon separates a case where a prophet prophesies officially in the name of God to serve idols, and a group of people push a city, a large group of people, to serve idols, that both of those cases are more lenient because stoning is more severe. And in that case, it's more lenient and the punishment is choking. Because he doesn't over here give the reason why. Reb Shimon just doesn't have the Gzera Shava by Navi Anidachas. So therefore, the Navi Shidiach, therefore, the Torah says Misa is just choking. So he says like this. So the Gemara asks a question. So we can't compare. So the Gemara says Ligmar Mimesis. Why don't we just compare Irni Dachas to a case of an instigator? Both cases are not wholly officially people. They're just people that are trying to be manipulative, but not saying that they're prophesizing. We should compare it. What's the difference if it's one person pushing one person pushing a group? So they say, done in Mesis Ram, we learn it, but we try to compare the effect. The effect when you're talking to a community is less of an effect when you're talking to an individual. The thinking is, actually I remember somewhere we saw the thinking with. The thinking is that when you have, I think the Gemara clearly, Shuki, you have better memory than me. I think the Gemara clearly says, the thinking is that in the city, the Irni Dachas, the city that gets pushed, is the people should have known better. When you're a community, you shouldn't fall for people that are pushing you to serve idols. Where if when you're one person, you can get manipulated easier than a community. A community shouldn't get manipulated so fast. So Rab Shimon compares it. They ain't done in Mrs. Rabbi, Mrs. Yachid. Can't compare a community that gets affected of an individual. So the Gemara says, Adrab, in the contrary. Done in Hedyet Mihedyet. Why don't we learn a situation of a common person, meaning not a person who's claiming to be a prophet, even if they're trying to manipulate a city, but they're still just claiming to be private individuals. So why don't we try to compare that to private people to private people, or simple people, not prophets? So Reb Shimon says, why are we comparing a person who's just a regular person from a prophet? So Reb Shimon says, so once he crosses over and becomes a prophet that is instigating others, what's more simple of a person than that? I mean, that person's not a holy person. That person's obviously as low as you could get. A person who's pushing people, obviously falsely in the name of God, to serve idols. Okay. Now that's what we got to 2 weeks ago. Now we're holding over here. Reb Chizr. Reb Chizr says like this. Machlokes, the disagreement between Reb Shimon and the rabbis about the punishment, if the punishment is stoning or the punishment is choking, is ba'oigfer haguf da'avodas kafavim, top of page 90, Amud Aleph, is only talking about a case where the prophet, so to say, tries to eliminate the entire law of idol worship, or so he said, or if the prophet says only partial parts of idol worship we shouldn't keep anymore. Doesn't make a difference whether it's the actual whole idea of idol worship or parts of idol worship. So the punishment is by stoning. Why? Where do we know that? How do we know that even a prophet only pushes certain parts of idol worship? The Rahman Amr, the Torah tells us, the verse says, like we quoted before, the verse says, long verse, the verse says, it's coming up in Devarim, that Navi Ahu, this prophet, this visionary or dreamer, you should put to death. So we don't know what kind of death, but let's put that to the side. We already discussed, that's the argument of Shimon and the rabbis. How do we understand what that death sentence should be? But why does he get put to death? He spoke bad about God. We took you out of Egypt, and he pushed you off the way. So the Gemara, so the rabbi, so Reb Chizda says, it says min haderech, from the way, which means afilu miktzas haderech, even if he only pushed you a little bit off the way, not the whole law. so then he gets punished according to the rabbis by stoning, according to Reb Shimon, by choking. But if the prophet doesn't come to eliminate idol worship, but other laws of the Torah says kosher is no longer important, right? Didn't someone say that? So it says kosher is no longer important. If someone prophesies, it says I'm a prophet, and I'm prophesying no longer this person have to keep kosher, or any other law that's not connected to idol worship, then Divri Hakol B'chenek, everyone agrees that the punishment in such a case is only choking. The case of stoning is only, hold on, Aaron, is only a case of idol worship that's connected to idol worship. Hold on, we continue, and I'll get to you in a second, Aaron. B'kiyim mixas or bittul mixas, and also Reb Chizda continues. If a prophet comes and tells in the name of God to kind of not keep certain parts of a mitzvah, the Bishar mitzvahs, the Vihakol Pater, everyone agrees that he doesn't get put to death at all. So according to Reb Chizda, let's just break it down. The argument between Reb Shimon and the rabbis, if the punishment by death that the Torah says is either stoning or choking, is in a case where the prophet prophesies officially in the name of God to no longer keep the laws of idol worship, whether it's the entire idea of idol worship or even components of it. And in the case of where the prophet comes to tell us about the laws of other laws of Torah, so then the rabbis, according to Reb Chizda, the rabbis agree with Reb Shimon that the punishment is like choking. And in the case where they come to eliminate only parts of a regular mitzvah non-connected to idol worship, everyone agrees it's potter. Why is it potter? We have a limud. The limud says that the limud said there's the verse about a prophet prophesizing something that is not connected to idol worship. It tells us to do something. So it says ki davar sarah. It says you must ki davar sarah. You should be put to death because he took us off the way of something, davar. And the limud is davar b'lei chatzi davar. Only if he takes off a full mitzvah but not a part of the mitzvah. Aaron, you're asking.
Yeah. So since you said even a part of a mitzvah is killing, a lot of before there was Christianity, they were Jew. A lot of them were Jewish, and they said just what you said. So why weren't they killed?
Say that again.
Okay, a lot of before the Christian religion, a lot of those people were Jewish, and they said we don't need to keep those 13 commandments. So why aren't they killed?
If the Torah is, first of all, if someone comes in, someone says as a prophet, I'm talking in the name of God, that God told me that no longer do we have to keep any part of the laws of kosher, according to Reb Chizda, everyone agrees that you'd get put to death by choking. If the Bezdin would have the ability to do that, they would. Not always in history did we have the power to exercise the death penalty. If you ask them about a question within the connection with Christianity, where someone came and said that certain mitzvahs are no longer part of our life anymore, and God, we could drop a certain mitzvahs. In theory, the Bezdin would have, the Sanhedrin would have the obligation to put that person to death if they had the ability to do so. If, however, he comes and says, no longer do we have to keep certain parts of the mitzvah, we're not going to go into how much of a component does that mean. Does it mean not to keep mahadrin, or no longer have to eat the OU, but you could eat okay? Or if he says, that you have to keep kosher, but you don't have to do shchita. So if it's only a component, it has to be a full davar, a full mitzvah. Chatzi davar. So because the Torah says that, I don't know why he's not quoting the verse on the side over here. Usually he quotes the verse of the davar and chatzi davar, but Rashi quotes it. Strange. Okay, so Rashi says over here. Oh, here he quotes the pasuk. Rashi says we learned it from another pasuk. It says doesn't say the word hadacha, so we don't have clearly any way to say that it should be by stoning. So it says, Rashi quotes that a prophet that prophesies to something in my name, he didn't hear that from me. I never said that. So then that prophet gets put to death. And everyone agrees that when it just says misa, it means that it means by way of choking. However, if he only says a half an idea, the hasem davar chsiv, it says asher yazil davar davar b'shmi. Davar means a full subject, but if he only comes to say prophecy about a certain aspect of the law, not the full law, like I said, certain components of kosher, so then it'd be different. Okay, so he says like this, he continues. The Gemara says that's a Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda says, so he breaks down the argument. So if we put it in short, Rav Chizda says that the argument between Rav Shimon and the rabbis is only in the case of idol worship, and it doesn't make a difference if it's a partial law or the full law, because it says min haderech. And in the case where it's another mitzvah not connected to idol worship, there's a special verse in Dvarim separately that teaches us, doesn't say the word hadacha, so you don't have the limud, the Gzer Shavat, to say the punishment is by stoning. It says misa, which means choking, and there it says davar, full subject, not chatzi davar. So again, there's three categories. There's idol worship is totally separate from any other law, and idol worship is where the argument is, and in idol worship, any component of idol worship that a prophet comes to say that one is allowed to do, obviously not in the name of God, gets, according to Reb Shimon choking, according to the rabbis, they get stoning. I'm going further. Meisav Rav Hanuna asks a question. The Leches, the Parsik says like this. In the Parsik that talks about a prophet that prophesies about idol worship. So if you go back in the Parsik, I'm not going to read the whole Parsik again, it's a long Parsik. So it says, so the end of the Parsik says, he pushes you from the way, which teaches us even a partial of the law. So he says like this. Laleches, the Rabban, we learned laleches means mitzvah. Laleches is when you say to go. To go means a positive. So there's to go. There's a positive component that he's telling you to do something. And it says, but laleches ba is mitzvah. So we have another limud that talks about achatos, where the word ba is connected to lo saseh. So he's saying that either he tells you to do something positive connected to idol worship, theoretically, or to do something negative, meaning to transgress. So the Gemara says, mitzvah slice bal do mitzvah slice. Now, so Rabbi Nun asks a question. What transgression of a positive commandment connected to idol worship could there possibly be? There's nothing positive. There's no part of idol worship that's positive. Meaning to say, the Torah tells us not to do something. Don't serve idols. The Torah doesn't say anything that we should be doing that's connected to idol worship. On page Avi, we're back middle page, top of the page, Sadik Amdal. So Rabbi Menuna is asking, so how? What's if the limud is that we say leches is mitzvah say? What's the mitzvah say that he would be telling us? Not means say the prophet saying don't do this mitzvah say connected to idol worship. So even different, Rabbi Nun says if you want to say according to Reb Chizda that the whole argument of Reb Shimon and the rabbis is only talking about avodas kachavim, because that pasuk in Devarim Yud Gimel Vav is only talking about avodas kachavim. So, about idol worship, what do you find where the Navi would tell us something the Torah tells us we should do connected to idol worship that we shouldn't do? So Tirgum Reb Chizda answers. There is something. What is that? I think it's in, is it this week's parsha or later? It says, "V'nitzastem," that you should. The pasuk says, the pasuk says, "V'nitzastem es mizbechaitzav." You should destroy the altars of the idols, and that's a positive commandment. And if the prophet comes and says, "God told me no longer do we have to destroy the altars of the idols," so that he's coming to tell us of something connected to idol worship that he's telling us not to do the positive commandment that Hashem asks us to do. But Rabbi Nunan doesn't subscribe to that answer. So Rabbi Nunan says no. The fact that there's a mitzvah say mitzvah it means that the pasuk is talking not just about idol worship, and therefore he says like this. Rabbi Nunan breaks up the argument between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis like this: if a false prophet comes to eliminate any single mitzvah, a full mitzvah, don't keep kosher, don't keep the laws of idol worship, don't keep the laws of tefillin, any one of the 630 mitzvahs, any one of them, he comes to uproot an entirety of that mitzvah, then he gets the death sentence. And in a case where he comes and tells us only a little bit about idol worship, means he only comes to eliminate partial of the laws of idol worship, only idol worship. It says from the way. Even partial of the way. Alvakia mitzvahs or bittul mitzvahs, the shar mitzvahs divi hakol pater. Where Rav Nuna said that in the case of he breaks up the pasuk in Dvarim Yud Gimel. He says that the pasuk, even though the pasuk is telling us lo leches, which means any positive commandment, but that's only talking about uprooting an entire mitzvah. But in another mitzvah that's not idol worship related, that he only comes to tell partial, so that we don't learn from that pasuk, and therefore in that case it would be pater. So Rav Nuna divides the argument like this: in the case of idol worship, whether it is idol worship or a full, if in the case of a full mitzvah, whether it's idol worship or another mitzvah, the rabbis hold it's stoning and Reb Shimon holds it's choking. If he's coming to uproot a partial mitzvah, if it's connected to idol worship, so then the rabbis say stoning and Reb Shimon says choking. If it's a partial mitzvah that's not connected to idol worship, then everyone holds that in such a case you would be pater. The false prophet does not come and get the death penalty at all. I just want to see if Rashi says, hold on, Eric. Hold on. Okay, and here he's like this, and here Rashi says, this is a Rashi. The Rashi says that in the case where he says Diri Hakol Potter is talking about in the case where he doesn't say a prophecy about a mitzvah. He says a prophecy about, I'm just going to read the Rashi, it's towards the bottom of the page on the right hand side. It says Diri Hakol Potter, Afil Michenek. Here's the problem is like this. What Rabbi Nun is doing is a little tricky because Rabbi Nun is dividing the verse of Dvarim Yud Gimel Vav. According to Chizda makes sense. Dvarim Yud Gimel Vav is talking about idol worship. The whole pasuk is talking about idol worship. Therefore, we're going to lechas mina derech to learn only that even partially get killed. And the lechas is including this mitzvah say of incites. And ba means mitzvah of worshiping idols. And there's a separate pasuk has nothing to do with idol worship that says ki yazid, that if he speaks something about a mitzvah that I didn't tell him, then he gets put to death. And even the rabbis agrees that we can't compare that to Ir Nidachet, and therefore he only gets the punishment of choking. Rabbi Mebnun has a problem because he wants to say that in the pasuk it talks about idol worship. It says lo lechet, which includes any positive commandment. Comes to teach us that in the case of that, if the false prophet is uprooting any positive commandment, not specifically idol worship, and then he said that minaderech is only talking about idol worship. So he kind of is dividing up the pasuk a bit. Rashi doesn't really explain. He says Rashi just says the Rachmana minaderech avoid the zarakai. That part of the pasuk is only talking about idol worship. That katila is baru shar mitzvahs b'hayin leches b'kumat. Basically, Rabbi Nuna says an interesting limit that I guess applies to how we learn any kind of pasuk when we're trying to understand the pasuk. When you have a limit of the pasuk, there's the limit to go backwards in it. Right here we have a long pasuk. For those who are holding cup in the shiloh over here is like this. Here we have a long pasuk. Pasuk starts etc. He pushes off people. Min hadera. Min haderech means even if partial. And then he says in the continuation, like the pasuk has a comma. According to Rav Nuna, the pasuk kind of goes. There's two subjects in the pasuk. The second part of the pasuk says the lechaspa, and there it only comes to teach us that even a positive commandment. But up until that point, we're not talking about a positive. We're only talking about avodah zarah. So therefore, when the pasuk says mina derech, it's only referring to avodah zarah. When it says the leches, it's talking about only the positive commandments, only a complete positive commandment. And we have another verse that says ki yazil leDavid over b'shmi, which I didn't say. And in their case, it says he gets put to death, but that's only if he says the full subject, which is a full mitzvah. And therefore, if he says a half of a mitzvah not connected to avodah zarah, because the mina derech is only talking about initially, which is again, it's a complicated concept. So then he says everything is pater. Here I just want to say, Rashi says, what is the subject pater? Afilu mechenek. Aaron, we'll get to your question in a second. The hasam davar shalom chsiv. The lava oike divrei Torah. It's not even talking about the laws of Torah. Hi ki yazil davar davar kaya. the davar the hasam skilu ella advarim ba'alma going to Tzitkiyahu ben Chana. He's talking about an example would be where like when Tzitkiyahu ben Chana tells Achav that God told him that he should go to battle because he's going to win the war. There's no mitzvah there. He's saying God told me to go fight this battle because you're going to win. God never told him that, so he gets put to death for saying something God told him that never told him to do. Okay, Aaron, you wanted to ask?
Yeah. So I'm gonna give you a scenario, then give me some kind of answer. Yeah. So you have one person, he's going to be put to death. You got two opinions. So how do you know which opinion to go with when you're in the
that's the halacha. Whatever. In these cases, we have rules of how we do the halacha. It's not like we could choose. And usually, unless we have a reason, the halacha is according to the rabbis, to the majority. There's an argument. This is not the code of the Jewish law. We're not telling us what the actual ruling is. The ruling is going to be that whether it's Maimonides or other of the great poskim are going to tell us in what scenarios do we go after. Do we go with the majority, and with what case we go with it? If there's any case where we take the opinion of a single opinion. Okay. Someone prophesies to take off some part of the Torah. Chayavim l'chayim chayiv. He gets put to death. The chayim mitzvahs or batal mitzvahs. What about to keep some mitzvahs or to part of the mitzvah or to take away part of a mitzvah? Reb Shimon poiter. Reb Shimon says you're poiter in such a case. In the case of idol worship, even if he says only today you should worship idols, but tomorrow you shouldn't worship idols. Okay. So here we have a Tanur Rabbanan which is cryptic. We don't know. Here it seems to say, and seemingly Reb Shimon is the only opinion that you're potter on a chatzi davar of a regular mitzvah is Reb Shimon. Until now, both Reb Chizda and Reb Hamnuna quoted what we said before that there's that a chatzi davar of a regular mitzvah everyone agrees you're potter. So he says, Abai Savar like Reb Chizda. Abai says this goes according to Reb Chizda. Umatar like Reb Chizda, and he explains it to Reb Chizda. We'll see in a second. But Rabbi Savar like Reb Nun, and Rabbi says this price is coming to tell us in the opinion of Rabbi Nun. Umatar like Rabbi Nun. Abai Savar like Reb Chizda. Abai holds like Reb Chizda. You have to understand, Aaron, back to your question. There's two arguments here. There's one argument between Reb Shimon and the rabbis, and there's an argument between Reb Hamnuna and Reb Chizda. How do we understand the argument? The argument of Reb Shimon and the rabbis. I mean, to say even if we go according to the rabbis, that they're in the majority opinion, which says that the punishment is stoning. But the question is the punishment of stoning on a prophet who prophesies only about avodah zarah, about idol worship, or also about other mitzvahs? According to Rabbi Hamnuna, would apply to other mitzvahs. Now, in this case, you have to understand what would the deciding factor be? Who do we go according to Rabbi Chizda or Rabbi Hamnuna? That we would have to see in the Rambam and other poskim how they. What the psak is according to the Rambam, according to Rabbi Hamnuna, or according to Rabbi Chizda. Okay, so the Gemorah says like this, and Rava says that this goes according to Rabbi Hamnuna. Umtaras like Rabbi Hamnuna and explains us how the wording would fit to Rabbi Hamnuna. And now we'll see how the Gemara explains. Abai Savar like Rabbi Chizda, Umtaras like Rabbi Chizda. It says like this. Hamisnave. This is how you're supposed to understand the statement that we just learned. Hamisnave la'akar davar min haTorah. Someone who says a prophecy to take any part of the Torah. Divrei Hakol v'chenek, everyone agrees. This is Reb Chizda. Means that's not a mitzvah of idol worship. Everyone agrees that it's chenek. That's what Reb Chizda says. The punishment of death is choking. The kai mixes uvat mitzvahs, and to keep part of a mitzvah and to break part of a mitzvah. Reb Shimon potter. Reb Shimon holds it's potter. Who adin the Rabbanan also agree it's potter because everyone agrees that if you only do avoidus kachavim, case of worship. These are words that are missing. Even in such a case that he does only partial, then you're chayiv. And markidisle, depending if it's the rabbis, it's stoning, and according to Reb Chiz and according to Reb Shimon, would be choking. So Abaye says that this is going according to Reb Chizda, and so this price is not difficult. It's just missing words that we have to insert, and these are the words that we push it. Rabbi says no. This Mishnah, if it's already cryptic, we're going to translate it according to Rabbi Nun. And he explains like this: if you come to take out a full mitzvah, whether it's idol worship or any mitzvah, you're chayiv. And what are you chayiv? Markidisle. Depends who you're talking to. The rabbis would say you're chayiv misa of skila, and according to the Reb Shimon, you'd be chayiv the misa of chenek, of choking. Tai mixes, levata mixes, v'shar mitzvahs, v'shar poter. If it's talking about anything else that's not idol worship related to, so then Reb Shimon says it's potter. And what the Rabbanan would agree, however, it's chavim. But if it's talking about idol worship, and he says to eliminate partial of the law, the chayiv, then you get death sentence, and what death sentence you get? Market Islam. Okay, that means basically once you're missing words and you have to add words, you add as many words as you want. So if you're going according to Rava, then you're going to add words according to Nuna. It says there's basically three arguments here: an argument on avodah zara, and a full, whether it's avodah zara and any other mitzvah. It's skila according to the rabbis. If it's a partial mitzvah, it's skila. If it's avodah zara, if it's not regular mitzvah, it's chati davar, not partial. So therefore, you don't get any misa. And Reb Shimon is always choking, and if it's a partial mitzvah, you're pater. And therefore, the rabbis agree. The Mishnah says Reb Shimon, it's just telling us something, the most extreme point that the rabbis would agree. Okay, there's Rashi's on this to put it in, but the basic idea we understand of what Abai and Rav are saying. Okay. But they're not changing anything. They're not changing anything in the argument. They're just explaining this statement to be according to either one. All right. Again, so now we're gonna say this. Amr Rabba Rabba says this. Amr Rabbi Yochanan. This is a very controversial. This is a very controversial idea, because the Torah. This is where the Torah, so to say, in certain places, the Torah makes it so vulnerable. And the vulnerability is that, like this. In any case, where a prophet who's approved, like Rashi says, we're not just talking about a person who comes up with a stick and wearing a cloak and says, I'm a prophet, and I said no longer do we have to keep a certain mitzvah. But if a prophet who's an established prophet, like we're going to explain, like Eliyahu Navi, Elijah's prophet, so it says, Rashi says, Im Yom Lecha Navi, HaMuchser. Rashi says it has to be an established prophet. Oiver al Divrei Torah. I'm telling you now that the Torah says, for instance, what's the case of Elijah the prophet? Elijah the prophet was dealing with major idol worship, and he wanted to show the people that they have to make a choice. So he did something that was against the Torah. He gathered the Jews in Har Carmel, which is nowhere near Har Bayis, not near the Temple Mount, and he sacrificed the sacrifice. Now the halacha is, once Shlomo Melech built the Beis Hamikdash, it was forbidden to do sacrifices outside the temple. And here Elijah the prophet, technically the reason he did it obviously was, just off my head, is obviously because he wasn't the part of Israel that wasn't under the area of the Beis Hamikdash. There was two kingdoms then. There was the kingdom of the north and the kingdom of the south. The Beis Hamikdash was in the kingdom of the south. He was dealing with issues in the kingdom of the north. The kingdom of the north didn't let people go to the south to go to the Beis Hamikdash. He couldn't gather the people to the Temple Mount. So he gathered the people to Har Carmel, and he did a sacrifice to God. And the fire came down from God and consumed the sacrifice. But here the Jewish people should have said, whoa, Eliyahu Navi, what's going on over here? Why are you doing a sacrifice outside the Beis Hamikdash? It's funny, God put the Jews there. So he says, we only hear about the negative, but that doesn't mean that with everyone. So he says, but Rashi says, and so Elijah was already established prophet. Everyone knew whatever Elijah says, God's talking. Avral Divrei Torah, go against the Torah. If it's only something that's for the moment, doesn't say for now on we can always sacrifice outside the temple. He just made a takonis shah, a one-time, so to say, exception. Like in the case of Elijah the prophet, who allowed to sacrifice outside of the temple. He did it that one time because he wanted to get the people back to tshuva. So the Ravo says, listen to him. If he says, then that's what you have to do. I don't care how established this prophet is. If he tells you to serve idols, that's why it was so challenging for the Jews to go after them. We're going to learn in Chelik. I think it's a Chelik Shuki. No, you learned already. I think that's when the discussions in Chelik, next parak, where Yeravim and Avat, the Jewish people were God-fearing under Solomon, pretty much. When they split the north and the south, and Yeravim and Avat was a great scholar. No one learned the secret of Torah like Yeravim ben Avat. He learned with the Achia Shaloni, and he had to take the Jews and lead them straight. He wanted to lead the Jews straight to idol worship. He had to pull off a whole scheme to his fool Achia Shaloni to sign off that he should sign up to, that they should listen to him. But here the Rabbi Bo says the name of Rabbi Yochanan, you should listen to him. When it comes to idol worship, there's no such thing. Not only if he's an established prophet, even if the prophet holds the sun still, means it doesn't allow the sun to move, miraculous, and says, "Look, I'm doing a miracle," like Moshe said. What Moshe said? Moshe said, "Listen to me. You want to know who I am? Look, I just turned the water into salt, the water into blood, right? Or I just made tsiras." But here he goes and he says he stops the sun and say, "Look, obviously I'm a person of God. If I'm telling you to worship idols, how would I have the power to stop the sun?" Al tishmalai, don't listen to him. Tani Rabbi Yossi Aglili. So basically says that Oimer Hagia Torah Seif Daita Shavetz Kavim. Pikach Nasna Torah Mamshala Shafilu Mami Lachama B'Emtzeriki Al Tishmalai. So Rabbi Yossi says that the Torah recognized the power of idol worship. When you go to the other side, you have power. If there's power on good, there has to be power on bad. That's the rule, right? It always has to be. Means if you only have a prophet of God making miracles and there's no miracles on the side of the negative, so so there's no bechira. So Rabbi Yossi says, look, the Torah saw the power of avodas kefavim, and therefore he says even if he stops the sun, because maybe he could stop, it means that there is a miracle. The sun, hold on, the sun will be stopped. Don't listen to
Rabbi,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question. How does this connect to taking a goat up to Har Azazel, kicking it off the cliff? In the sense of not avodah zarah, but like in the like imbuing of another entity of appeasing Azazel without quite embodying it.
Okay, that you're already getting deep into the concept that's appeasing Azazel. You have to remember this. The Rashi says a very interesting word. Rashi, because you're right. There is a kind of a carbon concept to the Azazel, but there it doesn't. It's not shchutei chutz. It's not slaughtered. The prohibition is to slaughter outside the temple. So the slaughtering, the slaughtering outside the temple is what's prohibited. And
So the word sacrifice we've been using is specific to slaughtering.
Yes, that's what Rashi says. But you're asking a good question. I have to remember after myself the procedure of the paraduma. If I'm not mistaken, unless the paraduma they shech. That they're not there. It's not. I don't. It's considered a chatas. But it's not definitely not in the base of Mikdash. I'm not sure if I have to remember when they did the slaughtering of the paraduma. If I'm not mistaken, they did the slaughtering of the paraduma also outside. I have to check paraduma obviously, but the Torah tells us clearly about paraduma, but how to do all the details of paraduma. But the Azazel is not, even if you want to call the Azazel a korban, it gets pushed down the mountain, doesn't get slaughtered. Where Leonav he slaughtered and he built an altar, and there's whatever. I have to check paraduma. But paraduma, obviously, the Torah tells us clearly the details how to do it. So it's not like the prophet saying to himself. But you're asking about the question of Azazel. That's a question of shchutei chutz. I think that would be that. So Rabbi Yossi says. So now we're going to have an argument between Rabbi Yossi. I don't even get to your question. 1 second. We have an argument between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Kiva. You can see Rabbi Kiva's opinions. Rabbi Yossi basically says that the Torah gives power to avodah zarah. Look at Rashi says. Rashi says, "Nasna Torah mamshala b'kleimer afilu tira oisei navi Moshe v'oisei kirtzonei v'chsiv v'nasin eilecha oisei moifus." The Torah clearly says one of the complications of a false prophet is the false prophet again is not just someone; it's someone who's giving a miracle. He wasn't even a muhtik, not even like an established prophet, but he actually comes and says, "I'm an established prophet. I'm going to show you a miracle that what I'm saying is true. That God said to worship idols." So Rabbi Yossi says that the God gives the power for them to do that. And therefore the Torah has to tell you, don't listen to it. That's a complicated halachas and the Mefarshim who's it referring to. Some people say it's referring to the ideas of Christianity. So here Rabbi Kiva says, Rabbi Kiva, chas v'shalom. God forbid to say that. Why would God ever stop the sun for someone who doesn't listen to God? He says no. It doesn't mean to say that we're talking about a prophet that shows a miracle to say to survive. That God would never allow such a thing. We're talking about a prophet who's an established prophet, like Hananiah, Ben Azur, that he was one. At first, he was a false prophet, and afterwards, he said a lie. He didn't say the truth. That's where you would go wrong. But if he shows you that you think that God would make a miracle, and then you would have to choose and see a miracle. Although, from what Rabbi Yossi, it's mashman. That's how we understand it. Not so much like Rabbi Akiva. Yes, Aaron, you wanted to ask.
I just had a quick question. Bahira means
Sorry,
Bahira.
Vihira. What are we talking about?
I just heard you say that word. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong.
A clear. Vihira means to be something a clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly the word you used. I just want to know the meaning.
Yes, clear.
So it means clear?
Yes. I mean, I'm forgetting what I said it with regard to, but that's what it would mean.
A few parrots back.
Rakia, maybe the word Rakia. Rakia
Maybe.
means the heavens. He stops the sun in the middle of the heavens.
Both of those words are good that I know. So
Sorry about that.
no problem.
Okay, now we're just going to finish off the parak, everyone. So he says like this. The Mishnah says another case of chenek would be zoymim bas koyin, a false witnesses that come to say testimony about a daughter of a kohenes who is engaged, who has relationships outside of her engagement, obviously not with her groom to be. So then the punishment is death. Traditionally, such a case is a punishment by death of. Okay, actually, it's not talking about engaged because if remember the Gemorah argues about that. Going to the opinions that skila is more severe. But a daughter of a Kohen who has relations outside of her marriage, so the regular case would be he put to death by choking for relationships. However, in this case, she's a bas Kohen, she gets burnt. Bas Kohen, the daughter of a Kohen, is straight. We learned that in the previous paragraph. So what happens if you have a case, you have a daughter of a Kohen, okay, Hennes, and you have the person who she has relationships outside of her marriage with, and you have false witnesses. The story never happened. So if the story never happened, we have false witnesses have to get punished the same way they wanted to punish her. So if their testimony would be accepted, she'd be burnt to death. So maybe they would have to be burnt to death. So then that we said from here we have a special case. No, comes to 8 false witnesses, they don't get the death penalty of burning. They get the death penalty. Again, burning doesn't mean burnt at the stake. It means they take in a hot liquid. But they get the penalty of choking. How do we know? We know honey. How do we know? Maybe they should get burnt. Streifa. The name Ravika says the Tanya we learned. Rav Yossi said, what is the verse that we have in general about false witnesses? Again, false witnesses in our case in Torah is a design, and it's not just that they've been contradicted, but we had a second set of witnesses come and say that it's not possible for you to say testimony on this case because you weren't even there. We know clearly you weren't there because you were on vacation with us in Greece, and there was no time for you to be there in the hour that you said that you were there in the United States. So, but where is the verse that teaches that they get the punishment of death? That they get done to them what they wanted to do to their brother. Brother is male. The rule is like this: any false witnesses who are caught to be lying, meaning to say that they weren't there, so they can never say testimony to the situation they've never been to see. In any other case, they get the same punishment as they're looking for the zoymehem, I mean the witnesses, and by laying the people that who are having relationships are all the same. So everyone has the same punishment, and therefore the witnesses get the same punishment. However, bas koyin he b'sreifa, she gets burnt, but the man who she has a relationship with is not ein bayela b'sreifa. He doesn't get burnt; he gets stroked. So So maybe we don't know. Maybe the false witnesses get the punishment that they want to give her, or maybe they get the punishment that they want to give him. Right? So we have a case. You have false witnesses, means they're saying a story that never happened about a woman who's a daughter of a Kohen, she's married, and she has relationships with another guy. If their testimony would be accepted, she would get burnt and he would get put to death by choking. Now, we say in general, the witnesses have to get the punishment like they want to give. Now, the question is, the problem is that there's a couple, and the couple get different punishments. So maybe they should get the burning, maybe they shouldn't get the choking, especially as burning is more severe. So how do we know what to do? So the Gemara says we know. That's the pasuk. So when the Torah tells us last is the achiv, what he wants to do to his brother, meaning male. In this case, we learned the word male not just he's talking figuratively, but actually, the achiv it means to mean that he gets like he was trying to do to his brother, like they were trying to do to their brother, not like they were trying to do to their sister, i.e., they get the punishment of the male, not the punishment of the female. That's the conclusion of the parak. Hadron alecha elu hena nechmat. All right, Chevra, next week we are going to start the Ezer Hashem Chelek, and I'm not going to learn any of the Hakdamas, more than the basic Hakdama that we have. There's a lot of Hakdamas. There's a lot of people who wrote. Chelek is the next, final parak of Sanhedrin that deals with a lot of the laws of the afterlife and the laws of Mashiach and laws, a lot of Agoda, a very powerful parak. It's quoted in many parts of many of the parts of Torah. Of course, the first mission starts off with famous Kol Yisrael Yisrael Chelek Le'elam Haba. There's the famous Rambam's Hakdama on Chelek, where he learns the 13 rules of the Animamim. I believe the Animamim comes from the Hakdama of the Rambam and Chelek. I'm not going to learn it. It's a study that has to be studied on its own. The Hakdama of the Rambam on Chelek is a very important thing to study, but it's not a quick study. So I'm going to post it online in English and Hebrew, and everyone's welcome to study it on themselves. But he goes into the laws of Olam Haba and how do we understand Olam Haba, and how do we understand the Olam Haza? Do we understand our mitzvahs we do in this world? How do we understand mitzvahs in the other world? And based on that, he builds the 13 bases of belief. I really encourage everyone to learn that before we start Chelek next week on Tuesday night. Laila Tov, everyone, and take care.